Shalom. And first and foremost, give all honor, glory, and praises to the Most High. And we do so by Sham Hamashiach Yahushua, not by Shem, but by Sham Hamashiach Yahushua. It's your brother Sadiq back here again with another second day lesson. Right, I want to say happy feast of dedications to those that are celebrating right now. Right, so today we're going to be reacting to a video, one atheist versus 25 Christians, right? One atheist versus 25 Christians. Let me get that queued up.
A purpose to it.
Did God command the ethnic cleansing?
Okay, so I want to open up with the book of Colossians, chapter 3 and verse 17. And whatsoever you do in word or deed, do all by Sham Hamashiach Yahushua, giving thanks to the Most High and the Father by Sham Hamashiach Yahushua. So everything we say, everything we do it all in the name of the anointed Savior, right? So let's look at this video right here, right? Again, it's titled One Atheist versus 25 Christians. Hey, that atheist, he kind of put the smackdown on these Christians. Y'all got to get y'all weight up. And that's what this class is about tonight, to help you Christians get your weight up in these scriptures, because it's a shame when an atheist knows the Bible more than a so-called follower of Christ, right?
Of the land of Israel.
I'm not saying the scribe made something up. I'm saying the scribe has a command.
So where did they get that command from?
From God.
I had Jesus appear to me 3 years ago.
I don't know what's happening there. I have to suspect it's some kind of psychological phenomenon. Hi, my name's Alex O'Connor. I'm an atheist and host of the Within Reason podcast. And today I'm surrounded by 25 Christians who, God willing, might be able to change my mind. My first claim is that suffering makes God's existence unlikely.
So first claim, suffering makes the Most High's existence unlikely. So what we also, first before we get into this, what we understand is that suffering is not always a punishment. Suffering can also be used to prove your character, right? So let's see what some of these Christians have to say about this question or this claim.
Good work.
Hey, Alex, how's it going?
How's it going? Nice to meet you.
Sage. Why don't you just begin? Why is suffering or evil make God's existence unlikely?
I think when confronted with two hypotheses, so atheism, naturalism, or theism, we should ask what we expect would occur under either hypothesis. And then we look at the world and we see what does actually occur. And what do we find? We find, I think most relevant here, a system of natural selection, the mechanism by which God apparently chose to bring animals and ultimately human beings into existence, a system which is defined by suffering. Survival of the fittest is the same thing as the death and suffering and destruction of the unfit. I'm told that the very mechanism that God chose to bring about the human species as the ultimate end of his creation was one that is imbued with suffering, such that 99.9% of all the species, let alone animals, that have ever existed on planet Earth have been brutally wiped from existence into extinction. And I think that that's less likely on theism. If you assume atheism or materialism, not only do you explain this, you also come to expect it.
What is your, I guess, epistemology? How do you know that this is the case, that it's less likely and that, an atheist worldview, a naturalistic worldview would look like the way it is today?
Of course, we don't know, but that's why I use the phraseology of unlikely. I think that if you were to tell somebody who was sort of in some Rawlsian state of nature, hadn't seen the world, and you said that the world has been created by an omnibenevolent, all-powerful God, what kind of world would that person be imagining? And if you dropped them into the world, if you were given the opportunity to become a wild animal, like in 2 seconds, I was just going to turn you into a random wild animal somewhere on planet Earth. I like
being a guy.
I think you'd probably kill yourself before I had the opportunity, because you know that the life of these animals is almost defined in terms of their suffering.
I guess I just don't really see how you can justify that claim per se. What I would say is that if we actually take into account the holistic view of the scriptures, which I do think that you have to do, we see that it's actually much more coherent once you acknowledge that evil itself doesn't have ontology. Evil's not a thing. You don't look under a rock and say, there's the evil, right?
Fine by me.
So
I'm not really talking about evil here, because that's, of course, a moral.
Evil and suffering don't necessarily go hand in hand, right? Like I said, suffering is not always a punishment, but it's also used for the Most High to prove your character. Let's look at the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 2 and verse 1. And it reads, "My son, if thou come to serve the Most High, prepare thy soul for temptation. So prepare yourself for suffering, is what it's saying. Set thy heart, meaning your mind, aright, and constantly endure. So you have to endure suffering, right? Endure hardships, and make not haste in time of trouble. Cleave unto him. You have to cleave unto the Most High, cleave unto the scriptures, right? And depart not away, that thou mayest be increased at thy last end, meaning in the last days that you will increase. So the scripture so far is telling us to endure suffering, because suffering is what's going to prove your character. Whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully. So whatever type of suffering you get, let's say you lose your job, you lose your wife, you lose your husband, right? Whatever it may be, you lose a child, you lose a loved one. It says take it cheerfully, meaning say all praises to the Most High, right? Not AP, not APTTMH, right? But all praises to the Most High, because the Most High is now approving you. It says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a low estate. So when you get suffering, right, be patient through that suffering. Verse 5, for gold is tried in the fire. We liken ourselves to gold, to fine gold. That's what the Most High likens us to be fine gold. For gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. So, a lot of times Christians, they do the Christian shuffle where, they don't want nothing bad to happen, right? So they think that the Most High is nothing but all love, 100% love, right? That's what they feel that the Most High is.
Moral term. I'm talking about suffering.
Can you distinctualize suffering and evil?
So evil is a moral term. Evil means that something is bad, it's immoral. You need to have a moral ontology for that. Suffering is just any experience that's not wanted when experienced, right? And so even if you don't have a moral objectivism, you can still say that suffering exists. So here's a question. A deer gets its leg caught under the branch of a tree that's fallen over in the wild, and it starves to death in confused agony. Why does God oversee this? And why does God set the natural world up such that events like this occur?
Well, because the ultimate view here is that...
Okay, pause.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, look, I'm getting a call from one of those unknown numbers.
Have you tried reversephone.com?
Reversephone.com?
Good work.
Allison, man.
How's it going? Nice to meet you too.
Okay, so my first question to start out with is what exactly about suffering makes this unlikely on the condition that God exists?
I think that if God is all loving, then he probably wouldn't want his creatures to suffer. And so I think that the fact that they do suffer makes his existence less likely.
Okay, perfect. And is there some specific...
Okay, first and foremost, the Most High is not all loving, right? That's a common misunderstanding, misconception. The Most High has multiple different factors. We have multiple different factors. We love, we hate, we get mad, we get sad. We have multiple moods. So if we have multiple moods, and the Most High only has one type of mood, which is all love, or one type of behavior, which is all love, wouldn't that make us above the Most High? If we have something that the Most High doesn't have, right? The Most High gets jealous. We get jealous, right? Let's read this. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 21. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward? So he's talking about animals, right? It says, who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward? So the spirit of man, when you pass away, right, your body goes into Sheol, which is the ground, the grave, right? And the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth. So the animal, the spirit of the beast, the Bible says it goeth downward into the earth, right? So he's talking about the suffering of animals. But the animals their spirit don't go up into the celestial abode.
Aspect of suffering that you're particularly honing in on, horrendous or whatever
in particular, non-human animal suffering. Because I think that the Christianity has a celebrated tradition of theodicies trying to explain why suffering exists. Human free will, the development of the soul, higher order goods, all of this kind of stuff. none of which apply to the suffering of non-human animals.
Have you heard of the axiological expectation mismatch problem?
I have not.
Okay, so philosophers of religion have started to understand that the thing that actually generates a problem between God and suffering is actually the value system you attach to the very attribute of perfect lovingness. Because the problem of evil is an internal critique, you have to look at a very specific version of theism. And
So there you go again. This man, he's also now relating suffering with evil. Evil and suffering, they don't necessarily always go hand in hand. Suffering can be used as a punishment, but also suffering can be used to prove your character. And that's the thing with Christians, right? A lot of times with Christians, what y'all don't want to do is y'all don't want to be proved on anything, right? You don't want to prove your character through the scriptures. Let's look at Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 3 and verse 5. And having been a little chastised, meaning just a little bit of suffering, they shall be greatly rewarded. For the Most High proved them. You become greatly rewarded when you have to go through some type of hardship, some type of suffering. For the Most High proved them and found them worthy for himself. So you can't say that you're the best if you ain't been through nothing. Like I always say out on the streets. It says, as gold in the furnace hath he tried them and received them as a burnt offering. So you have to go through something. You know, you have to endure a little bit of suffering, a little bit of chastisement.
how it defines perfect lovingness. I want to present to you a version where my version of perfect lovingness does not actually constitute a problem and a misalignment, that mismatch between the suffering of animals, let's just say the profusion of suffering of animals
Great.
and the existence of God.
So let's hear it. What kind of God are we imagining that would allow and oversee and do nothing to prevent billions of years of untold animal suffering?
Right. So you're talking about non-prevention.
Or setting up the system that is natural selection, such that it relies upon things like predation and disease.
Well, the first part is I don't agree with the whole setting up the system part. So I'm not one of those theists that believes that God does this select and pick idea of creating worlds. I don't think that God actually creates worlds. I think that God lets worlds develop according in a certain way, but because God can oversee an overarching narrative, he knows exactly how he can redeem anything. The first time, sorry, go ahead.
Could God have made it such that animals were all herbivores instead of carnivores and omnivores?
Yes, he could totally do that.
Okay, so had he done that, here's an instant way to reduce by orders of magnitude the amount of suffering that exists.
Right, but hold on. That's particularly assuming a value theory already that I haven't told you I'm adopting that has a problem with the evil. So I have to give you my value theory first for you to show that misalignment.
Okay, let's hear it.
Perfect. Okay, so my value theory says that it's not the most important thing about a sentient creature is not what merely happens to them. It's about the total timeline of their life and how and where their life permanently ends. Meaning, if you were to judge an author of a narrative and the first few chapters, let's say, there's a lot of bad things happening, but the end ends with this crescendo where there's victoriousness, there's redemption, there's beauty, and everyone in the story actually endorses their entire existence.
Right, and that's being tried. That's suffering. We want the story to end with a reward, a prize, which is the kingdom of heaven. So you have to go through the suffering, like you said, a crescendo.
That they live, they can look at their they can look at their total timeline, and they actually each subjectively come to the conclusion, I'm glad I was made, and I totally see what my suffering was for. That's the particular I'm using with. So we have to judge, like John Hicks says, we have to judge the very nature of God's lovingness by what he does in the end, not these few time slices that we observe right now. For you to show that there's a problem, you have to show to me that the suffering of animals cannot be transformed, are intrinsically cut off from being transformed into a life that they will endorse. There's a couple of theses on the table.
Okay.
But sure, go ahead.
Okay, so are you talking about the end of their life is in their end of life on earth, or are you talking about the afterlife?
I'm antemortem, postmortem.
Okay, because if you're just talking about life on earth, then I would say that if you...
Let's look at this. Let's look at the book of Judith, chapter 8 and verse 25. Moreover, let us give thanks to the Most High, our power. So we read in the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 2, that we have to be cheerful when we get suffering, right? Here in the book of Judith, it's saying the same thing. Moreover, let us give thanks to the Most High, our power, which trieth us. So we have to give thanks to the Most High when he gives us a little bit of suffering, right? When he makes it where we have to call on him, pray on him, whether it be good or whether it be bad, we constantly need to call upon the Most High, even as he did our fathers. Verse 26. Remember what things he did to Abraham and how he tried Isaac. So Isaac had to be tried. Abraham had to endure do some things, right? He had to be tested. He had to be tested with his son, right? His only son, Isaac. He had to be tested with whether he should put him to death or not, sacrifice him. That's him being tried right there. It says, and how he tried Isaac and what happened to Jacob in Mesopotamia of Syria. And let's ask ourselves that, for those out there who have children, right? Could you literally sacrifice your only child for the Most High? That's a heavy thing right there. That had to be a lot of agonizing suffering going on inside of his mind. That had to be very, very stressful, Could you really sacrifice your first and only child? Right? Because that's what Isaac was called, his only child. He put by what's his name? Ishmael. Right? He didn't care about Ishmael, the wild man. He cared about Isaac. It says, when he kept the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, for he have not tried us in the fire as he did them. So we haven't been tried how Abraham was tried, right? I don't know if I can do it, I would have to have faith that I could do it, right? It says, as he have not tried us in the fire as he did them, for the examination of their hearts, meaning their minds, right? Neither have he taken vengeance on us, but the Most High doth scourge them that come near unto him. Meaning the Most High is going to try you. Those that come near to him, he's going to try you. To admonish them, meaning to clean them up, to fix them up, right?
If you had an author writing a book and a character, if we were trying to figure out the relationship between that author and the person in the book, and that person in the book shows up for 5 seconds in the first chapter and is a child who almost immediately dies of cancer in an incredibly painful way, and there's no development, there's no sort of bringing back to life and suddenly everyone's grateful for it. It is just this miserable, tragic experience. And I asked, well, what did the author not want to do for the story of the book, but want to do for that character?
Yes.
I think it'd be pretty damning. And also, when it comes to animals, we're talking about animals who are predated on from the moment that they begin existence.
Absolutely.
They sort of have disease. Zebras, when they're killed by lions, are often too big to be killed instantly.
Right.
So they die over minutes with their windpipes caught in the jaws of a lion. Sure. How can this be developing a zebra, which, by the way, probably doesn't even have the same kind of first-person conscious experience that humans do in order to sort of rationalize and abstract and learn from their sort of past and morally develop in that way? They just suffer. And what kind of God could oversee this?
Okay, so there's a lot of assumptions on the table again. Again, you're assuming a particular value system that I'm not laying
I'll tell you what
out.
I'm assuming here. What I'm assuming here is that a good God would not allow unnecessary suffering to obtain.
Okay, gotcha.
No, that's not what we read. That's not what we read. This is how the atheist is cutting the Christian, because the Christian don't know the scriptures. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 7. That the trial of your faith, trial. Let me get a quick definition of that word trial real quick. I'll just pull it up real quick on Edom Online. So trial. It says that the trial of your faith. Trial meaning an examination before a court, meaning your faith is going to be examined in front of a court. You're going to have Hamashiach Yahushai as your lawyer, your mediator, and you're going to have the angels as the juror, and you're going to have the Most High as the judge, the ultimate judge. So it says an examination before a court to determine guilt or innocence or the righteous of a cause. So you are going to be on trial. Each and every one of us is going to be on trial, right? 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 7 again. That the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire. Fire is the suffering. Fire is the temptation. Fire is losing something close to you. Might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Hamashiach Yahushai. So it's how will you get through that fire, right? How will you get through that trials and tribulations, right? We all go through things. I'm going through things, right? But we can't let it be seen that, oh, what was me? I'm going through something, right? We have to be examined and work through those trials, right? Let me get the book of Romans, chapter 5. The book of Romans, Romans chapter 5, and I'm going to go to verse 3. And it reads, and not only so, but we glory in tribulations also. So you have to glory in that suffering. Also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience. Your tribulation, your suffering bringeth about patience, because you don't know how long you're going to suffer for. You don't know how long you're going to have to endure for. Right? It says, and patience experience, and experience hope. Right now, we all still have hope right now because we are on the land of the living right now. You all have hope right now. We all have hope right now. Once you are in the grave in Sheol, there's no more hope in the grave at all. No more hope in the grave. Get a little bit more from this session.
So we can
Do
talk.
you agree with that?
We can talk about unnecessary suffering. We're talking about the justifying norms for suffering. You're saying it has to be in terms of necessity, which is an evil is only authorizable by God if it's in connection to a greater good or prevention of a greater evil. Correct?
If there's some kind of justification for allowing that.
Yeah,
Suffering.
but you're saying it's a necessary connection. Why you say? What's the term of necessity?
So perhaps I should say unjustified instead of unnecessary.
Okay, so we both agree. I do not believe that God can authorize justified,
tell me
unjustified suffering.
Tell me how that example that I gave you, the deer with its leg starving, is justified.
Because it's intrinsically redeemable, and the norms I'm working with is not this necessity condition that you're working with. Mine is about redeemable suffering, with redeemability, or we call it defeasibility. If that suffering can be defeated within the creature's life, and I'll define what I mean by defeat, which is that they can retroactively look back at what they went through and integrate it into their life history, where they look at their life.
I have to interrupt because the example I gave you is one where the deer dies.
Yes, the deer dies. But here's the thing. Well,
gotta get off this animal.
You're probably talking about this post-mortem example. Sure. I'm going to put one thesis on the table. There's two philosophers that defend exactly what this goes through. One defends that animals will be given a martyrdom status, while God will be able to present them himself in a way to.
Animals aren't getting martyrdom statuses. People get martyrdom statuses. Stephen, that's a martyrdom status, right? John, that's a martyrdom status, right? All the disciples that gave up their life, that's a martyrdom status, right? Animals don't get martyrdom statuses. You know, I was vibing with the brother until he got about talking about an animal gets martyrdom status. And animals don't get martyrdom status.
To animals in the afterlife, such that in the same way you could give praise to a dog, and the dog emotionally recognizes that he's loved and that his life is worth living, right? To these animals that suffered like that, there's one view on the table, which is that God will give them a praiseworthy status where they will be able to actually see that.
Can we talk about that claim? Because these animals are suffering for what? I mean, God might cause them to suffer a bunch.
Means to ends. This is not means to ends.
God might cause them to suffer a bunch and then essentially redeem them.
Let's fast forward a little bit. I think this dude right here makes some good points.
Is necessary. For suffering?
I would say probably, yeah.
Does atheism account for consciousness?
Yes, that's what I was talking about a moment ago. Perhaps not. Maybe theism accounts better for consciousness than atheism does.
So if there is no consciousness, there is no suffering. Is that right?
That's probably true, yeah.
So if atheism cannot account for consciousness, then it cannot account for suffering. Would you agree with that?
So I think what we're doing here is we're sort of slightly shifting the goalposts. If you don't want to grant the existence of the material world before we start talking about this, we can do an argument from consciousness, but then we need to debate whether consciousness is explicable on atheism. What I'm going to say is this.
Sure.
What I'm going to say is this. Consciousness may seem to imply the existence of a conscious creator of the universe. We're here talking about, I suppose we're talking about Christianity, and the claim was about God, but the God that you believe in, let's say, if we grant that there is a creator deity who sort of brings about the universe of conscious creatures. Have you ever heard of the evil God hypothesis that Stephen Law popularized or came up with?
Tell me it.
So the idea is that, like, imagine that there's a God who brings about the world and creates the world, but does it maliciously because...
Let's touch on this real quick, and I'm going to move on to the next segment. This is 2 Ezra chapter 16 and verse 73. Then shall they be known who are my chosen. So those that endure suffering, that come out on the other end of suffering, it says, then shall they be known. Those are the ones that are going to be known. The ones that make it on the other end of the suffering, right? Who are my chosen. And they shall be tried as the gold in the fire, because You have to go through something. You can't say you're saved and you ain't went through nothing. It says, "Hear, O ye my beloved, saith the Most High. Behold, the days of trouble are at hand, but I will deliver you from the same. Be ye not afraid, neither doubt." Because when you doubt, that casts off your faith. When you doubt, that casts off your belief. It says, "For the Most High is your guide." We have to let the Most High be our guide. Right? Let's get one more. Let's get Tobit. Chapter 3 and verse 21. And then I'm going to move on to the next segment, the next claim. Let's see, Tobit, no, it's like not Tobit. Psalms. Let me get that. Psalms chapter 34, verse, what is it? 19. It says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous." So you're going to have to go through something. You're going to have to endure some suffering. "Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Most High delivereth him out of them all." So you have to go through some type of suffering. Let's go to the next claim. I think it's at the 21:13 mark. Let's go there. Let's go to the next claim.
The video.
My next claim is that God commands genocide in the Bible.
Now let me see.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes, the Most High. Let me give our standpoints. Yes, the Most High does command genocide in the scriptures. Now let's see if these Christians are going to touch on this, right? I put down a note. So two main reasons, right? He commands genocide: for total destruction, so prevention of infection, right? So stop Israelites from adopting abominable practices. What are abominable practices? Breaking the commandments, right? Idolatry, being a whoremonger, right? Same-sex relationships. What else? What's another abominable practice? Interracial marriages and stuff like that. So he commands this right here for prevention of infection, and also he commands this for divine punishment. So the stance that the Bible teaches that yes, the Most High does command genocide in the Bible. Let's see if these Christians touch on it.
Nice to meet you.
Right. This is a bummer of a claim, right? Like when you look at scripture, right?
I agree.
There's a myriad of problematic things we see in scripture, from genocide to misogyny to slavery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that we find genocide in scripture. I would argue, though.
So you agree with my claim?
Yeah, I think it's in scripture. Yeah, I mean, I think it's in there.
Okay,
right?
well, thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, good stuff.
So, I mean, but here's what I would say I ought to do with this claim as a Christian, if you're okay with entertaining that idea, right? So we see mass murder in scripture, right? And so one of my greatest friends, Rabbi Josh Stanton, he's a rabbi, the Hebrew scriptures are his. That's where we're finding these genocides, right? And
Yeah, so to spell it out, we've got, I think the two most problematic are in 1 Samuel 15, the destruction of Amalek, and in the book of Joshua, the destruction of Jericho and the destruction of Ai. So for the sake of the audience who might not know about this, in 1 Samuel, for example, the Amalekites are a Canaanite tribe. They're in the land that's been promised to Israel. Israel are instructed through the prophet Samuel. King Saul is told to completely destroy.
Let's read that scripture he got here. 1 Samuel 15:3. "Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys." So this is where a lot of Christians, they turn away from the Old Testament right here, right? Because they say, oh, that was a God of that was a God that was the mean God right there. But the New Testament God, that's a God of all love, as if the Most High changes. The Most High changes not. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He doesn't change at all, right? So let's see what his standpoint on
Destroy the Amalekites, leave nothing alive that breathes, kill man and woman, child and infant, cattle and sheep. And in fact, when Israel does as they're instructed, they destroy Amalek, except Saul decides to keep the king as a captive, and he also saves the best of the animals. The prophet Samuel comes to him and says, "What have you done?" And he says, "Well, we kept the best of the animals in order to sacrifice to the Lord." And it says twice that God regrets that he made Saul king. Why does he regret that he made Saul king? Because Saul didn't follow his commandment to completely destroy the Amalekites by keeping the king alive and by keeping the best of the livestock. Saul says, we kept the livestock alive to burn as a sacrifice to the Lord.
Yeah.
And Samuel says, what pleases the Lord more, burnt offerings or the following of his commands?
Sure.
Right.
And so we know that we're talking about what I would define here as
This atheist knows the Bible right here. And if you look on the desk, the atheist actually has a Bible. None of these Christians have come up there with a Bible. That's why these atheists, this atheist right here is destroying all their arguments. Everything that this atheist, the claims that this atheist is making, none of these Christians can really combat it because the atheist knows the Bible.
a genocide.
Yeah. So it's in there, right? And I would say this is a great place where things
The
like
Bible right
progressive Christianity serve us
The
quite
Bible.
well. Not in the idea that God is progressing, but humanity is progressing further to a greater understanding of God's ethic and justice. I would
Okay, it looks like YouTube had stopped the stream. Okay, it looks like YouTube had. Let's see why YouTube stopped the stream. YouTube stopped the stream from the video that I was reacting to, right? I guess because of the material that's presented. But well, we can still go over it regardless, right? What the video is talking about. The video that I was reacting to is one atheist versus 25 Christians. I have the claims written down, so we'll continue on with this right here, right? So the claim was the Most High commands genocide in the Bible, right? So the Most High does command that. You know, the Most High does command that these things happen. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20, and verse 16. It says, "But of the cities of these people, which the Most High thy power doth give thee for an inheritance, thou shalt save alive nothing that breatheth." So this is the Most High. He says, these cities I tell you to go to, right, and make war with them. He says, don't save alive nothing that breathes, right? The atheist claim in that video that we were reacting to was that the Most High commands genocide in the Bible, right? It says, "But thou shalt utterly destroy them, namely the Hittites and the Amorites, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, as the Most High thy power hath commanded thee." So it's a commandment that the Most High says, you know, eradicate this nation right here, this nation of people right here. Let's see why. Because there's a reason why the Most High commanded that this happen. It says that they teach you not to do after all their abominations. That's the reason why the Most High commanded that these things happen. That you don't learn about their abominations. It says, which they have done unto their gods. So how's it that heathen nations, Gentile nations can be saved when they are doing these abominations unto their gods, which the Most High doesn't like? You know, stay tuned for next week because it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation about the Gentile salvation, right? We're going to really go deep into it, right? It says, "And the Jebusites, as the Most High thy power hath commanded thee, that they teach you not to do after all their abominations, which they have done unto their power. So should ye sin against the Most High your power, because everything that they do is going to cause you to fall into sin, right? And what is sin? Let's go to the book of First John, chapter 3, and verse 4. And it reads, whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. So these other nations are going to cause you to transgress the law because you're going to be following after the things that they do, like Christmas, right? Right now we have Feast of Dedication is going on right now. Right this moment, the Feast of Dedication is going on, right? Where we can we give tribute to the Maccabees for what the things that they did, for holding up the Most High's law, statutes, and commandments, right? Being fearless of these heathen nations, right? And the edicts that they put through. Well, we fear the Most High, something that we need to get back to this day still, right? Let me go to 1 Samuel, chapter, I think he was talking about 1 Samuel, chapter 15. And let's go to verse 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 2. They stopped, for those that are just coming in, I think YouTube had did something with the stream where they didn't want me reacting to the video, that was put up. So I can't post the video, but the video that I'm reacting to, I got the claims written down. I'm reacting to the video that went viral, 1 atheist versus 25 Christians. So it says 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 2. Thus saith the Most High of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. So the Most High says he remembers what Amalek, right? Amalek, right, did to Israel. And for those that don't know, Amalek is the ones that wear the tiny hats on their head. Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek. The Most High commanded Israel to now go and smite Amalek. Destroy Amalek is what he said. And utterly destroy all that they have. And spare them not. He said, don't spare none of them. Ne'er one of them. But slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Right? All of them, he said, slay. Let's go to Wisdom of Solomon. So we are responding to the claim that the Most High commands genocide in the Bible, right? That's the claim we're responding to, right? Let's go to Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 12. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 12. Let's go to verse 3. And it reads, for it was thy will to destroy by the hands of our fathers both those old inhabitants of thy holy land. So let me read that again. For it was thy will, meaning the Most High's will, to destroy by the hands of our fathers both those old inhabitants of thy holy land, whom thou hatest. So that destroys the claim about the Most High being all love, right? It says, whom thou hatest, meaning the Most High, he has emotions that he goes through. How can we have sadness? How can we be mad, right? How can we have different feel jealousy, right? And the Most High don't feel these things. That means we have something that the Most High doesn't have, right? If the Most High is all love. It says, whom thou hatest for doing those odious works of witchcrafts and wicked sacrifices. So this is what the Most High doesn't want us to do. This is why the Most High commanded us to destroy these other nations right here, because he doesn't want us to do the most odious works. Let's see what that word odious means, right? And I guess I can I can share my screen on this one since YouTube said I couldn't no longer use this video, right? So YouTube taking away all the fun today. Right. And for those that are just joining, please like, share, and subscribe. I think YouTube may have blacklisted this video today, but let's look up that word odious. Let's look up odious. Let's look up odious, because we really was going to be getting into how that atheist cut all of them Christians up, right? So odious, it means hateful, deserving of hatred, hated, regarded with aversion or repugnance. That's what that word odious means right there, right? It says, let me read it again. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 12, verse 4, whom thou hatest for doing most odious works, meaning hateful works of witchcrafts and wicked sacrifices. These are the things that these other nations do, right? So how could the Gentiles get some type of salvation when these are the things that they were into? They would have to be taught the law and taught that they cannot do these things, right? They have to learn not to do these things, because these are the things that they did unto their God, unto their power, right? Let's look at actually, let's read on. Verse 5. It says, and also those merciless murderers of children and devourers of man's flesh and the feast of blood, with their priests out of the midst of their idolatrous crew. They called the priests and the whole crew, meaning the deacons, the bishops, the pastors, the whole ministry, right? Idolatrous crew, the crew of idolaters. And the parents that killed with their own hands souls destitute of help. Souls destitute of help, meaning souls that couldn't get no help. That the land which thou esteemest above all others might receive a worthy colony of the Most High's children. So this is why the Most High commands genocide in the Bible right here, right? So all these murderers, devourers of men's flesh, they want infect the children of Israel, right? To cut and cease off that infection, to prevention of infection, to stop Israelites from adopting abominable practices. This is why the Most High commanded that in the Bible. This is not going to be in the kingdom of heaven at all, right? Let's go to Ecclesiasticus, chapter 16. Let's go to Ecclesiasticus, chapter 16. And let's go to verse 9. And it reads, he pitied not the people of perdition. Let's look up that word right there. He said, he pitied not the people of perdition. Let's see what that means right there. Let me share my screen real quick. Share my screen. Add it to stage. Let's see. Perdition. Condition of damnation. Spiritual ruin. State of the souls of the wicked in hell. Let me read that verse again. Ecclesiasticus 16:9. He pitied not the people of perdition, meaning the people that are going to be in the lake of fire in hell. The condition of damnation. It says the condition of damnation. Spiritual ruin, meaning this is a spiritual thing. State of souls of the wicked. So, I had a class, a couple weeks ago about hell being a real thing. Hell is a real thing. It's talking right here, perdition. It says the souls of the wicked in hell. So following behind these other nations will lead you to hell, the lake of fire. He pitied not the people of perdition. So don't have no pity. If the Most High don't have pity for the people that are burning in the lake of fire, we shouldn't have no pity for the people that are burning in the lake of fire, who were taken away in their sins. That's how you get the lake of fire. When you're taken away in your sins, right? Let's look at the book of Numbers, chapter 35. Let me see. All right, Salakia. Numbers chapter 33. in verse 55. Numbers chapter 33 and verse 55. But if ye will not drive out the inhabitants of the land, this is a ultimatum. Most I said, if you don't want to do it, you don't want to drive out the inhabitants of the land. But if ye will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, right? You don't want to get rid of these other nations from before you, right? You don't want to get rid of the Amalekites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, right? Then it shall come to pass, meaning it's going to surely happen, that those which ye let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes. Meaning what? They're going to give you trouble, right? And thorns in your side, and shall vex you in the land wherein ye dwell. They're going to be a problem to you, right? They're going to be a real problem to you if you don't want to drive them out your land. And right now, these other nations are a problem to the 12 tribes of Israel right now, to this day right now. Because our forefathers didn't drive them out of the land. Utter destruction didn't happen. Let's look at First Maccabees. Let's look at First Maccabees. Chapter 2. Man, I guess YouTube took all the fun away today on the broadcast today. That's crazy. First Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 24. Which thing, when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, right? Inflamed with zeal, right? Let's see what zeal is, right? It's not a common everyday word that Negroes use, zeal. It says that he was inflamed with zeal. So Mattathias was inflamed with zeal. Let's see what that zeal that he was inflamed with was, right? What was Mattathias inflamed with? Zeal. Passionate adore in pursuit of an object of course of action, usually desirable. Faith, study. This is what Mattathias was inflamed with. Faith, studying the Most High. Faith in the Most High, studying the Most High. But also a wrath or vengeance. This is what Mattathias was inflamed with. This is the spirit of the Maccabees right now. This is the spirit of the Feast of Dedications. The spirit of faith, study, wrath, and vengeance. Because best believe, seeing that temple how it was torn down, being the harlots inside of the temple and stuff like that, right? That inflamed Mattathias with zeal. Vengeance is what he wanted, right? Which, First Maccabees 2 and 24. Which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar, right? Because he has so much zeal with him, right? He has so much vengeance with him because he's seen how the temple was being polluted, right? It says also the king's commissioners who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of the Most High, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salome. He was zealous for the law of the Most High, how we should be. We should be zealous for the law of the Most High. That's the only way we're going to make it, is having this same zeal that Mattathias had. Right? Man, so the next claim that was made in that video, right? You two don't want us to have no fun today, but the next claim that was made in that video is this right here. There is insufficient evidence to believe the resurrection, right? That was the next claim that was made. There's insufficient evidence to believe in the resurrection. One of the key scriptures that the man had used inside that video, what's the name? O'Connor. Let me see. Let me get this guy's name again. If you want to watch the video that we're supposed to be reacting today, it's on one atheist versus 25 Christians, Alex O'Connor, right? So he made the claim that, let me see, I think it's St. Matthew. And none of the Christians could answer this right here, right? So I'm going to help the Christians out with answering this verse right here. It was St. Matthew chapter 27 and verse 50, how he was saying that the graves had opened, and nowhere else in the gospel it talks about the graves being open. But it does talk about the graves being open. So I'm going to read the verse that Alex O'Connor in the video one atheist versus 25 Christians, what these 25 Christians, none of them could answer, right? So this is St. Matthew 27 and verse 50. It says, Hamashiach Yahushai, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. So I'm going to read it first, and I'm going to give the understanding of it. Yielded up the ghost. He yielded up the spirit, right? And behold, the veil of the temples was rent in twain, from the top to the bottom. And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. So it was a big earthquake. It says, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and prepared and appeared unto many. So he said, nowhere else is this shown in the scriptures, right? Nowhere else is this shown in the scriptures, right? So let's get the understanding of the scripture. We're looking at actually, let me go ahead and pull it up on the screen, right? Since I got an additional screen to use. Let me see. Let me pull it up real quick. St. Matthew. Let's pull it up on let's pull up a Bible. So for those that are just tuning in right now, YouTube kind of took away the fun today where the video, they did not want it to be reacted to, right? So I'm just reading off the claims that are being made. So this is the verse right here that this is the verse, St. Matthew 27. Okay. All right, let me make that bigger. Let me make it bigger. Okay, make this bigger. Bear with me 1 second. I want to start. I can't see how to make it bigger on here, but yeah. So we're looking at St. Matthew 27 and verse 50 right here. This is the verse that is in question that none of the Christians could actually answer right there, right? So let's go to the book of Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter, what is it? Let's see. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 37. And this is the precept, for those that are taking notes, to St. Matthew chapter 27 and verse 50, right? So let's go to Ezekiel chapter 37 and let's start at verse 12, right? This is about the graves being open, right? And I'll read it as well. This is Ezekiel chapter 37 and verse 12. And it reads, therefore prophesy and say unto them, right? Thus saith the Most High, behold, O my people, I will open your graves. So this is the prophecy right here, and it would happen. It's still happening now. The graves are being open, right? But let's understand have a good understanding of what the graves are. It says, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves. Now, this is talking about some zombies just rising from the dead, right? Is this talking about the Walking Dead? No, it's talking about the spiritual graves, the spiritual dead. Before you come into this truth, this understanding, your spirit is dead. When you come into Hamashiach Yahushai, right, your spirit comes to life again. So when Hamashiach Yahushai, and actually, let me pull that verse up here. Let me actually put St. Matthew back on the screen again. me put St. Matthew back on the screen. So like it. St. Matthew chapter 27. And actually, I'm gonna start at verse 50. Actually, I don't think let me start there. St. Matthew chapter 27 and verse 50. This is the verse that the Christians couldn't answer inside of that video. St. Matthew 27 and verse 50. And it reads, Hamashiach Yahushua, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the spirit. So Hamashiach Yahushua, he yielded up his spirit so we can live, because we are the ones that were spiritually dead. So let me look at Ezekiel 37 and verse 12 again. It says, therefore prophesy, saying to them, thus saith the Most High, behold, O my people being who? The Israelites, being us, Yasha Allah. I will open your graves, meaning I will pull you from your dead state, your mentally dead state, and cause you to come up out of your graves, meaning cause you to wake up from your coma, and bring you into the land of Israel. Right? Let's look at St. Matthew again, chapter 27 and verse 51. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake and the rocks rent. A big earthquake happened. On the spiritual level, this is your temple, your body being shaken to its core, right? You're being shaken up, telling that you can't be an idolater anymore. You're being shaken up, being told that you can't be a whoremonger anymore. You're being shaken up, saying that you can't get tattoos, you can't smoke, you can't be you can't just be a dead person, is what it's saying. Let's go to Ezekiel 37 and verse 14 to prove that. It says, and shall put my spirit in you. We become Hamashiachims. We take on Hamashiach Yahweh's spirit when we become alive again. It says, and shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live. Meaning we come alive now. We become a new spirit. We become a new creature. We're no longer inside that grave 6 feet under anymore. It says, and I shall place you in your own land. Because when we all wake up, the chosen wake up, that certain number wakes up, which the Most High wants to wake up, that's when the Most High is going to send his son back, Hamashiach Yahushua, and then we're going to be put back into our own land. Then shall you know that I, the Most High, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Most High. Right? So let's go back to St. Matthew 27 and verse 52. It says, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, meaning they became spiritually alive again. You have to have a spiritual eye to understand this verse right here. And this is the reason why the Christians could not break that scripture down when it was posed to them by the atheists inside the video, right? So again, the claim is there is insufficient evidence to believe in the resurrection, right? Let's go to the book of Hosea, chapter 6. Let's look at the book of Hosea, chapter 6. And look, verse 2. It says, after 2 days will he revive us. In the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. So this is Old Testament. For you Old Testament, you OT only, right? Break this down right here. It says, after 2 days will he revive us. That he is Hamashiach Yahushua. In the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Right? Because everything is by Sham Hamashiach Yahushua. That's the only way we can get to the Father. Because the Old Testament, they knocked Hamashiach Yahushua out of the picture. But here he is right here in the Old Testament right here. Because wasn't Hamashiach Yahushua raised on the third day? Right? Let's look at the book of Jonah, chapter 1. So these are all things that the Christians couldn't answer in that video. Let's go to the book of Jonah, chapter 1, and let's go to verse 17. It says, now the Most High had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And this is symbolic of Hamashiach Yahushua. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. This is all, again, pointing back to Hamashiach Yahushua, showing the resurrection, because he said it was insufficient evidence to believe in the resurrection, right? Let's go to St. Matthew, chapter 12. and get a precept on Jonah. St. Matthew chapter 12, and let's go to verse 40. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. See that? That's pointing back to the resurrection. That's showing sufficient. We're going over sufficient scriptures to show the resurrection of Hamashiach Yahushua, right? This was a claim that the atheists made inside the video right here. Let's go to the book of St. Matthew, chapter 16, and verse 21. St. Matthew 16 and 21. From that time forth began Hamashiach Yahushua to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. More proof right here. More proof that he was raised right here, right? Let's look at the book of St. Matthew, chapter 20 and verse 18. St. Matthew, chapter 20 and verse 18. And it reads, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock. Those Gentiles right here are not the Gentiles that's going to be getting no salvation. Next week class, we're going to have an in-depth PowerPoint on the Gentile salvation, right? It says, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock. These Gentiles are heathen nations right here. To mock, and to scourge, and to crucify him. And the third day he shall rise again. This destroys Alex O'Connor's whole claim about it's only mentioned one time in one verse that he didn't understand, right? But the Christians, they didn't have enough ammo. They weren't biblically prepared for the battle with this one atheist. So this one atheist destroyed 25 Christians, right? And you can watch the video and then compare it to this video right here, because today YouTube kind of took away all the fun, so we can't react to it. Let's go to St. Mark chapter 9. This I know that we should be getting more views than we see, because how YouTube going to just this little small channel right here, YouTube sees it, flags the video, right? You see that? St. Mark chapter 9 verse 31. For he taught his disciples and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And after that he is killed, he shall rise the third day. So after he's killed, he's going to rise on the third day, right? That's proof. Proof outside of the book of Matthew, right? Proof in the book of St. Mark, chapter 9 and verse 31, right? Let's go back to St. Matthew again, chapter 28 and verse 5. And the angel answered and said unto the woman, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Hamashiach Yahushua, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come see the place where Hamashiach Yahushua lay. He said he's risen, just like he said he was going to rise, just like the prophecy said he was going to rise, right? Let's look at St. Luke. St. Luke chapter 24 and verse 6. St. Luke 24 and verse 6. He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again. So this is all proof right here, right? This is a lot of proof showing the resurrection of Hamashiach Yahushua. Let's stay in the same book and jump down to verse 46. St. Luke chapter 24 and verse 46. And said unto them, thus it is written. Where is it written? In the Old Testament, in the law. And thus it behooved Hamashiach Yahushua to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day. See that? In the Bible, in the Old Testament, it's written that he's going to suffer and rise again on the third day. Let's get a few more. Let's look at the book of Acts. chapter 2, and let's go to verse 31. It says, he seen this before, spake of the resurrection of Hamashiach Yahushai, that his soul was not left in hell, right? Meaning Sheol. Neither his flesh did see corruption. This Hamashiach Yahushai have raised up, whereof we all are witnesses. Though there was plenty of witnesses that took account of Hamashiach Yahushai raising up from the dead. Romans chapter 1 and verse 4. And declared to be the Son of the Most High, with power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead, right? And actually, that's a good way, that's a good part to segue off of, right? Into the last and final claim that was made inside the video that I was reacting to, right? One atheist versus 25 Christians. The last claim was that Alex O'Connor made was Jesus never claims to be God, which I 100% agree with him. Let's just read the last verse that we just read, Romans chapter 1 and verse 4, because he never made the claim to be the Most High, right? If there's Christians watching and this stream kind of got blacklisted, it looked like, you know, there's few people in this stream, you know, but if there's any Christians out there watching, right, I'll put a link out. I'll put a link in the chat. You know, I don't know who's going to get this link because, like I said, this, man, you two didn't want to have no fun today, but I'll put the link in the chat. And please show where Hamashiach Yahushai ever claimed to be the Most High. Let me read this Romans 1 and 4 again. And declared to be the Son of the Most High with power. Read it one more time. And declared to be the Son of the Most High with power. So Hamashiach Yahushai, he declared to be the Son of the Most High. Let's look at St. John chapter 10. And let's have a quick little English lesson, right? For my Christian brothers and sisters out there who failed English class. This is St. John chapter 10 and verse 30. And it reads, I and my Father are one. So what this is called in grammar is called a compound subject, right? Let me share my screen real quick. Let's pull up a compound subject, right? And this is why that one atheist was able to cut up so many Christians, because simple grammar, sentence structure is something that the majority of Christians do not have, man. They don't have it at all. So let me share my screen real quick. Let me share my screen. Man, I hate that this thing is so small. What happened to the whole setup has messed up on here. Let me see. Settings. Here we go. There we go. So we're looking at. There we go. Gotta make it bigger. Let me make it a little bigger. Pause. Let me make this. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Let me reshare my screen again. Why is it not larger on here now? Stop sharing. Oh man. Let me share it again. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay. So let's look at this real quick, right? Scripture that we're looking at right now is St. John chapter 10 and verse 30. St. John 10 and 30. And it reads, I and my Father are one. This is what you call a compound subject. So a compound subject is a subject when two or more simple subjects, right? The simple subjects is I and Father, right? A compound subject is a subject with two or more simple subjects. In other words, when the subject of a sentence is made up of two or more elements, it's a compound subject. Here's an example right here. A very simple example, right? Jack and Jill. The two simple subjects are Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill, those are the simple subjects. In St. John chapter 10 and verse 30, the simple subject is I and Father, right? Back to the example. Jack and Jill went up the hill. In this compound subject, the first simple subject is Jack, and the second is Jill. Notice that the simple subjects are joined with the conjunction and. So Jack and, that's the conjunction and, right? Jill. Now let's go to St. John chapter 10 and verse 30. I and, the conjunction is and, right? Notice that the simple subject are joined with the conjunction and. You go to structure of a compound subject, right? It says a fool and his money. The conjoining word right there is and. In St. John 10 and 30, the conjoining word is and. So in this example right here, it says a fool and joins that joins his money. So the fool and money, how those two things are conjoined is by the and. In St. John chapter 10 and verse 30, how I and Father are conjoined is by the and. Are one, meaning they are on one accord. Right? Let's prove that. Let's jump down to verse 36. St. John chapter 10 and verse 36. Say ye of him whom the Father hath sanctified and sent into the world. That's the conjunction. Sanctified and sent him into the world. Thou blasphemest, because I said I am the Son of the Most High. He says, because I said I am the Son of the Most High. So Hamashiach Yahushai never ever claimed to be the Father. So in that part of the video, in claim number 4, the atheist was correct. The Christians were wrong, because he never claimed to be the Father at all. He's always claimed to be the Son. Right? Let's look at St. because it's not, we really don't got to go too far into this, too deep into this, because there's plenty of verses, a plethora of verses where he says, my Father is greater than I. A plethora of verses. Let's go to St. Matthew, chapter 13, and verse 55. Is not this the carpenter's son? Wait, what? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? It's right there. The question was asked, is not this the carpenter's son? So it's not too far out to really go into that right there, right? Because the atheist was right in that part of it. He never did claim to be he never claimed to be the Father at all. He never claimed to be the Most High at all. He's always claimed to be the Son of the Most High, the Son of the Most High, the Son of the Most High, right? So if there's any questions, you can leave them in the chat. All the fun was taken out of this live stream right here, but for those that watch the playback, I was reacting to the video, one atheist versus 25 Christian, where the one atheist, that video went ultra viral. That atheist, he completely destroyed the Christians, right? And so I was just trying to give the Christians a little bit of Bible, right? A little bit of Bible so they can redeem themselves and fix their face, right? We go to the book of 2nd Ezra. Next week, I'm going to be going over it with a PowerPoint presentation, the Gentile salvation, right? Second Ezra chapter 6 and verse 25, it says, whosoever remaineth from all these that I have told thee shall escape. So you remain, you endure suffering until the end. You have to suffer in this life right here, so you can be proven. That's how you prove yourself, is going through something. You got to go through something. In order to make it to the kingdom of heaven, you have to go through a little something, something. It says, all these that I have told thee shall escape and see my salvation. That salvation is power, rulership, and authority, right? It ain't going to be no, just a quick spoiler alert. It ain't going to be no Gentile salvation, meaning the foreign nation salvation, right? They ain't going to see the salvation that you think they're going to see. And the Bible, the Bible proves that without a shadow of doubt. I'm going to definitely recognize where it's talking about Gentiles and where it's not talking about actual natural Gentiles, right? We're going to go through that. We're going to be biblically honest with it. It says, and the end of your world, the end of this world right here. This is the world. This world right here belongs to the Gentiles. This world right here belongs to the heathen. This world right here belongs to the wicked. That's who this world belongs to. It doesn't belong to the righteous, the ones that do the right thing. It don't belong to the ones that are doing the right thing. It belongs to the wicked. Verse 26. And the men that are received shall see it. So the men that endure trials, tribulations, suffering, you are going to be the ones that see it. The men and the women and the children that endure are going to be the ones that see it. I just recently seen that movie, The Running Man, right? And it was a really good movie, right? Me and my brother went to go see that Running Man movie. It's a really, really good movie, right? The Running Man, he had to endure. What's his name? I think it's was it Richards? Ben Richards. Ben Richards had to endure into the end, right? It says, and the men that are received shall see it, who have not tasted death from their birth. When you're reborn again, when the spirit of Hamashiach Yahushai comes into you, right? You don't see death anymore, right? All you see is life, because life runs through you. Hamashiach Yahushai is life. He's not he's that living water. He's not some stagnant body of water that just that's been collected by weeks and weeks of rain, and it has mosquitoes and it has fungus and mushrooms growing all out of it, and you don't never pour it out. No, Hamashiach Yahushai is that living water that causes you to be born again, that gives us life. It says, and the heart of the inhabitant shall be changed, meaning your mind is going to be changed. That's what it means to be spiritually awakened, coming up out of your grave, coming up out of your deep sleep. It says, and the heart of the inhabitant shall be changed and turned into another meaning. I mean, you're going to transform, right? There's going to be a transformation in you, right? So if there's not any questions, I want to say, Kwam Abanawa Yahweh. That's the Most High. That's what we always should start out off with, the Most High. Because without the Most High, we ain't going nowhere. Kwam Abanawa Yahweh, Kwam Hamashiach Yahushai, and Kwam Yasha Allah. Shalom.